So, just full disclosure there. Ah, I guess I better get the emotional baggage, huh? Um, Hi, family. My name is Jamie. Very grateful, recovered alcoholic. And why do we do a fourth step? Because when we get to Alcoholics Anonymous, we have all kinds of emotional baggage that we've been carrying around for a lifetime, and we've never had a process to deal with it. And some of that emotional baggage goes back to the time that we're little children. Mom and dad start with it, and grandma and grandpa, and aunts and uncles, and siblings, and everything. And by the time we get to Alcoholics Anonymous, those are the causes and conditions that we've always drank over, and we've been in a whole lot of emotional pain over it. So I have a little four-step demonstration because I brought my emotional baggage tonight. And in this, I have a few pieces of my life. And I always like doing this and opening up with it. And there might be some things that you might be able to relate to. Like I said, oftentimes those relationships start with that childhood stuff, right? And then we get involved with our first love and so on, and things are real special, and we break up and it's hard to let go. There's that emotional pain with that. So, we go into relationship after relationship after relationship. And one of the things that happens in Alcoholics Anonymous is, we have that whole 13-stepping thing going on. Step 1, my life is unmanageable. Step 12, I'm fixing to share it with you. And so, AA boy meets AA girl, and one day you hear the knock on the door, and it's like, hi, here I am, and I've got all my emotional baggage. Where can I put it? So we slide it under the bed, or we put it in the closet or something, and everything's going fine and wonderful in the relationship until you do something that reminds me of her. And when that happens, I get out that emotional baggage because I'm back in thoughts and feelings. And all of a sudden, I start going through all these old memories. And while you may not be her, I'm turning you into her in my mind. And then I'm starting to throw out a bunch of little nasty isms as we go along. So, I have that favorite picture that my girlfriend when I was 16 gave me. And, I'm 68 years old. Why am I still hanging on to this picture, right? And then I have the picture of the love of my life, the one that got away. I actually, in this case, the good Lord took her home, and this one was till death did we part, and she truly was the love of my life. But you get where I'm going with that. We hang on to old stuff because we haven't learned a process for letting it go. And then, most relationships start off not because you liked me because I have a rocket scientist mind, but it generally starts off in something romantic, right? We meet, we're at a club, the dance floor is fun, we go home with each other, one of us turns into the thing that wouldn't leave, and 3.5 years later we wake up next to this person going, who the hell are you? You weren't like this when I met you. So it generally starts off in some sort of romantic or sexual nature, and then when that starts to fall off, oftentimes what happens is we go by one of those stores where they sell the magazines that require paper bags over them, because what we're starting to already do in this relationship is we're starting to cheat emotionally, and maybe some of us have been through that. Oh, but they're just girls I'm looking at. No, I'm emotionally cheating when I do that. So then we come into the age of technology and cell phones, and now I get to do all kinds of stuff. I get to meet people that I don't even know if they're real and have totally inappropriate conversations with them. And I've known a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous to lose marriages over cyber affairs. that happen through chat rooms and stuff like that. So all of this is just adding to the damage more and more. And then, in this relationship, we've been together a while. I think the name Obsidian on this box is just ideal too. This person's trying to put me in a box that I don't fit in. And my box is empty, and I've got nothing left to give in the relationship because I'm selfish and I'm self-centered and I'm living in fear, and it's all about me, and you're not giving me what I need, yet I don't know how to give you what you need. So then as we go through the relationship and things start to escalate, my drinking starts to escalate, and we never talk about the elephant in the room. My alcoholism, my drinking, my anger, my rage. And, things are really nice until one day you do something that really pisses me off, something terrible, and I pick up your favorite statue and I hurl it across the room. And of course, this poor little guy lost his head completely. Have no idea where it is. I've found pieces of his head, but I have no idea where his entire head is at. So, I'm doing all of that stuff to hurt, and because I'm hurt. And as we say in Alcoholics Anonymous, hurt people hurt people. So I've gone through this lifetime of relationships, and I have what I here as I refer to as my favorite t-shirt, the one with the hole in the sole. And most days I generally just end up wearing it like this because it's much easier. But what it represents is it represents all of the brokenness that I never healed from until I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and I started taking steps. And when all of that stuff in that emotional baggage becomes so overwhelming and life isn't going well, I break out the old smelly blanket, which is my best friend. I've had it since I was a little kid, and I throw it around myself, and it's that place where I feed the depression, and I feed the loneliness, and I feed the self-pity, and all of those things that keep me sick. There's a place in our book, page 64, it talks about when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. And of course, being on page 64, it's dealing with resentment. But I also believe that when every problem in my life is rooted in spiritual maladies. So when I take the spiritual principles that we learn how to live by in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I begin to apply them to every other aspect of my life, what happens is I begin to heal. And that's what step 4 is all about. And it gives me a pathway to learn how to do that. So that's a little demonstration on the emotional baggage. And let me turn off my phone here so that there won't be any interruptions there. And Trish, anytime you are ready. Folks, this is a 63 slide PowerPoint, but it's our 4th step. And some foundational 1, 2, and 3 step stuff leading into the 4th step. And the reason that we're doing it this way, everything is out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, but the reason that we do it this way is because we are such visual creatures. And when we see it, it gives us an easier understanding, or at least we hope so. So you're up, Trish. Welcome. And you're muted.
Hi everybody, I'm Trish and I'm an alcoholic, and yes, I was muted. And welcome to the Lppbbsg Primary Purpose Big Book Study 4th Step Workshop. And that is a mouthful to say, but we got a lot of stuff ahead of us to go over and go through. And you can find audio copies of this workshop and other things on our website, which you can find it, or on our website at Lppbbsg.org. And so while that's up now, since you don't have to remember the acronym, there is a slide on it later. If you want to take notes, if you want to take screenshots, please feel free, and that way you'll remember how to get in touch with us, and you'll have the information to refer back to.
Absolutely. Folks, feel free, if you can't screenshot, feel free to go ahead and take a picture of the slides as we go through this if you like. You're more than welcome to. Let's open this up with the set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, the 12 steps, the big book, the meetings, my disease. But most especially, God, please set aside everything I think I know about you, so that I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please let me see the truth.
And our preamble, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Please keep in mind that this is a workshop. We will be discussing some real life examples of what could be difficult things for some. While questions are encouraged for clarification, we do not expect any specific discussion to encroach on topics that should be saved for your sponsor or for a one-on-one conversation. Feel free to take notes as we go along. This workshop should not be used as a platform for sharing your fifth step.
And again, please use your notebook to write down the slide number from the right-hand corner of each slide. That way we can take all questions at the end, but we'll know which slide to go back to for clarification and for further understanding.
And before we get started, we want to talk a little bit about our three legacies and our triangle. And, you know, we always hear people say, unity, service, and recovery, but that's not the way the triangle really reads. It reads from the bottom and goes clockwise, and everything starts out with recovery, which is the mind, found in the big book from pages XXV to page 164, set of 12 spiritual principles that are the 12 steps. Have you continued to actively take this 12-step process outlined in the big book? And unity represents the body, found in the fellowship, set of 12 spiritual principles found in the traditions. Do you have a group that you are committed to? Is your group committed to the 12 steps, and does your group live by the 12 traditions? And service and spirit, which represents our service structure as well, found in carrying the message, set of 12 spiritual principles found in the 12 concepts. This applies from the group level through the service structure all the way to GSO. Are you working with others and taking them through the 12 steps?
While this is a fourth step workshop, it's always good practice, and I do this with the people that I work with, to review the foundation of steps 1, 2, and 3 before beginning. Therefore, we'll be reviewing some hotspots to be sure that the foundation is intact leading into step 4.
Through the information we read in the doctor's opinion, along with the first 44 pages, we are given the information we need to self-diagnose our alcoholism. Only 51 pages in all lead us to this decision. This is our step 1.
And step 1 from our book Alcoholics Anonymous, page 30. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed.
Bang! I love that little hammer. And from page 60 of our big book, and being convinced, we're going to take a look at the ABCs a little bit differently than we normally read them in meetings. A, am I convinced I'm an alcoholic and that my life is unmanageable? Step 1. B, am I convinced that no human power could have relieved my alcoholism? Still step 1. And C, am I convinced that there is a power greater than my own power that can and will relieve my problems? A and B. Step 2.
Referring back to We Agnostics, and that's in our book on page 50 and 51 is what we're looking at. And this chapter is going to give me a pathway to letting go of old ideas and old beliefs, and it will help me open my heart and mind to finding new ideas and new beliefs. And in the book it says, this happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them.
And we're going to go to my favorite pages, 60 through 62, in A Life Based on Self-Will. But we're going to read this in the first person. And when I'm working with someone new, I always, while in a meeting, I read the book in the we and the us as it has been written. For myself and for the people that I work with, I always try and get them to read it in the first person to insert themselves into the book and find themselves. If my arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as I wish, the show would be great. Everybody, including me, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, I may be sometimes quite virtuous. I may be kind and considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, I may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, I am more likely to have varied traits.
What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. I begin to think life doesn't treat me right. I decide to exert myself more. I become, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit me. Admitting I may be somewhat at fault, I am sure that other people are more to blame. I become angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is my basic trouble? Am I not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Am I not a victim of the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only I manage well? Is it not evident to the rest of the players that these are the things I want? And do not my actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Am I not, even in my best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony?
Boy, howdy. I am self-centered, egocentric as people like to call it nowadays. I'm like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter complaining about the sad state of the nation. I'm like the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. I'm like politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. I'm like the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. I'm like the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever my protestations, am I not mostly concerned with myself, my resentments, or my self-pity? Selfishness and self-centeredness, that I think is the root of my troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt me seemingly without provocation, but I invariably find that at some time in the past I have made decisions based on self, which later placed me in a position to be hurt.
So my troubles, I think, are basically of my own making. They arise out of myself, and I am an example of self-will run riot, though I usually don't think so. Above everything, I must be rid of this selfishness. I must, or it kills me. God makes that possible. And there often seems to be no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. I've had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but I could not live up to them, even though I would have liked to. Neither could I reduce my self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on my own power. I had to have God's help. This is the how and why of it. First of all, I had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, I decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be my director. He is the principal, I am his agent. He is the father, and I am his child. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which I passed to freedom.
Trish, before you move, okay, never mind. Go down. Just go down to the slide number on that. For those of you who just came in, there's a slide number at the bottom of each page. If you have any questions on it, we'll come back to it when we're done with the presentation. So if you'll write down the slide number, and again, you're welcome to take pictures of any of the slides or anything if it will be helpful to you. Okay, Trish, thank you. Now that the book has given us the ideas that our problem is based in self-will, we need a pathway towards finding out what our own selfish, self-centered fears and delusions are. This comes from the process of the 4-step inventory. The first 3 columns are centered around our resentment and how they affect us. Every column after that looks at our own thoughts, actions, and patterns. This is the discovery process of who we have become.
And again, from page 62, how? First of all, I have to quit playing God. And why? It didn't work.
It did not. And our 3rd step prayer. So as we go through the 3rd step prayer, I'd like to ask everybody to think about something. Are we asking in this 3rd step prayer to have God relieve us of some of that stuff we read on page 60 through 62? And our 3rd step prayer, when we get to it, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. So is some of that stuff, the writer, the actor, the director, the selfishness, self-centeredness, all part of what this problem is in my life? Is it foundational to that? And through this prayer, am I asking God to relieve me of much of that?
So we're going to take a quick look at the 3 aspects of a relationship with God, and this comes from page 62. The director and the actor. A director runs the show. The actor listens for direction. On my own, have I failed to provide what I need to be okay? Am I ready to make the decision that hereafter God will direct my life? The principal and agent. An agent represents who the principal or employer would have them be. Have I failed to be the person I would have me be? And have I failed to make others who I need them to be? Am I ready to make the decision that hereafter I will represent who God would have me be? And father-child. A child trusts their father can provide what they are incapable of doing on their own. Have I failed in directing my life on my own power? Am I ready to make the decision that hereafter I will trust that God will provide what I need?
So there's a lot of 4-step workbooks out there in the world. Hazelden puts one out, and many recovery centers do. But this is what it was really meant to be, was a notepad. The 4-step was never meant to be a check-the-box inventory. The instructions in the big book always say, referring to our list, which we have written out in detail.
Before I begin, and as I turn as I'm writing, I'm going to pray something like this. God, please help me see the truth about the things in myself which have been blocking me from you.
So, page 65, we're all familiar with Bill's diagram on page 65. Here we're only going to look at the first 2 columns instead of the first 3. We're going to work each column from top to bottom, and we're going to list all of the names first, and then we're going to go back and list all of the causes. And we usually use examples as definite as this. I'm resentful of Mr. Brown. Mrs. Jones, my employer, and my wife. With Mr. Brown, the cause, his attention to my wife. He told my wife of my mistress. I'd be kind of ticked off about that too. And Brown may get my job at the office. I'd probably be upset about that as well. Mrs. Jones, she's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking, and he's my friend. She's a gossip. My employer, unreasonable, unjust, and overbearing, threatens to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account. I might deserve to be handed my walking papers there. And my wife misunderstands and nags. She likes Brown, wants house put in her name. And you got to excuse me for a second, Trish. Take the next slide. My horn is going off.
Okay. But while we're still on this slide and before moving forward, I want to point out that in this list, there's 4 different people I'm resentful at. And while a lot of times I may say, I'm so mad at them, I'm mad at them, and I've got every right in the world to be mad and just list off a whole barrage of reasons. But when it gets right down to it on this list, I have 4 people I'm mad at. There's only 11 different resentments. 11 different things that I'm mad at. So while I can always say I'm wrapped up in resentments, I'm mad at everything, when I put it down on paper and look at it, it's not always that much. You know, I've heard people say, I had a sponsor once who told me if I don't have at least 80 names on my list, I'm not doing it right. You know, I don't even know 80 people that I'm mad at right now in life. So a sponsor can't dictate how many names you're mad at, how many people you're mad at. That's something that you and God discuss that comes from God as you're doing your writing. Nobody can tell you how many people you're mad at. So am I moving on now, Jamie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, that was the floor show portion of the meeting, going out to turn my alarm off.
I couldn't tell you here if you said stay on the page or go to the next page. So here, we'll go to the next page.
It's your page now.
It is. After we complete the first 2 columns, then we go back and work the 3rd column, starting at the top, just like we did the first 2 columns. And the 3rd column are the 7 areas of self, which we see beginning on page 64. And they are self-esteem, pride, ambition, security, personal relations, sex relations, and pocketbook. So I'm going to add these after I'm completed with my first 2 columns. So I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. I've got the 3 causes why I'm resentful at him. What does this affect in my life? This affects my sex relations. This affects my self-esteem. And after self-esteem, we see fear, because so often fear is I know for me, fear was a driving force in everything. It either caused me to keep going or it brought me to a screeching halt. So when we get to that fear inventory, that did a whole lot of opening my eyes. I'm resentful at Mrs. Jones. I got all the causes. How does this affect me? It affects my personal relationships. It affects my self-esteem, and there's that word fear again. I'm resentful at my employer. 2 resentments there. What does that affect? That affects my self-esteem, my fear, and that affects my security. And I'm resentful at my wife. And I've already got the causes. How does that affect me? That affects my pride, my personal sex relations, and my security. And there's that word fear again.
All 3 of those columns are lies.
But they're my feelings.
But feelings aren't facts.
Nope, they are not. Feelings aren't facts, but they are valid. And we need to find out where they come from and decide what we're going to do with them.
There are people who will look at the chart on page 65 and say this is the 4th step. However, there is more work to do. The full directions start on page 65 and end on page 71. Page 72 states, we have been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator and to discover the obstacles in our path. Causes and conditions, page 64. Without these other columns, I am missing most of my discovery process. The following slides are the rest of the process.
And I'm going to throw something in real quick and why it's so important to take this step with a sponsor and have the guidance. I did not with my first fourth step, and I'm one of those people who I looked at the chart and said, okay, I wrote the chart, I'm done. And that's all I had to do. I was in a meeting last night, and there was a woman talking about her first fourth step, and she called her sponsor and said, I'm done. That seemed really easy. And her sponsor said, nope, you're not done. Turn the page. And the woman turned the page and she realized there was still a whole lot more work going. But because I was trying to do the sponsor list, I didn't have somebody to tell me, turn the page. There's more work to do. So here we go. We're going to turn the page now.
Nope. Turn the page the other way. I want to go back to the third column page for just a second. Folks, on that third column, what Bill has in the diagram, I've known a lot of alcoholics who just put, oh yeah, it's fear, oh yeah, it's sex relations, but never get to the definition, never look for that 7 areas of self in those columns. And I just might be cutting myself short if I give it a blanket answer rather than giving it some root definition as I go through this process. Okay, Trish.
And that's why it's so important to have that notebook and not just to check off the box inventory. So we have the space to look at and dig deeper to see, why is it fear? How is it affecting my relations? So from our book Alcoholics Anonymous on page 66 and on page 67, before each fourth column, consider in paragraph form, how have I done the things I've resented in column 2 to the person I've listed in column 1 and or others. And that comes from page 66, paragraph 4. And it says, this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick, like ourselves. And basically what that means is, how many times have I been so mad at you that I just turned around and did the same thing right back to you that you did to me? Or to somebody else, just because I'm mad. So after considering this realization, then we say the fourth step prayer from page 67. This is a sick person like myself. How can I be helpful to them? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done.
Trish, I have a question.
Yes?
What does that prayer plant the seed of in us?
Oh, I was waiting for you to say that.
Oh, I'm going to let you do it. That's why I wanted to ask the question.
Okay. This prayer is the introduction to me for forgiveness. Maybe not a whole lot of forgiveness, but it brings a little bit, lets me start considering forgiveness towards other people. Because if I'm angry, I can't be helpful. I don't want to be helpful. But if I'm asking God, how can I be helpful to them? God, save me from being angry. And then I'm asking for God's will be done. I can't be helpful and I can't release that anger unless I've at least begun the process of forgiveness.
Yes, you have learned so well, Grasshopper. So, this is what our column should look like on a notepad. The first column from page 65, and it's what it should look like when completed. These are individual resentments. Notice there are multiple resentments, like Trish said with Mr. Brown. There's 3 separate resentments. So, as Trish said earlier, we have a tendency to bundle resentments and not really define what each individual resentment is about. Mrs. Jones, there's 2. My employer, there's 3, and we just ran out of room to do the wife. But hey, if we've ever been married, we know that there's some resentments there, don't we? Okay, go ahead, Trish.
So what we see on this page is a blank form. And what we have done is we've come up with our own forms. And they're not check the box forms. It's exactly what it is you're looking at right here. It's a blank on the white side. Spaces for names, spaces for the causes or the resentments. And we would be happy to send these to you by email if you pop your email into the chat, and I can get them out to you after we're finished tonight. Anything that you see on these yellow pages, there will also be a corresponding white page, first of example pages and then of blank pages for you to print off as many copies as you need, so that it'll save you a little bit of the work. You still have to do all the writing, but the prayer is on the top. God, please let me see the truth. Stop, pause, pray, write it, write over it. But remember to invite God into the process so that you can be thorough in your inventory. Did I miss anything?
There will be a total of 13 instructional pages that come with this, and they will print out in white too, because we want to save all that yellow ink so you can go out and paint a school bus if you need to. But so we have the example pages that are all instructional, and you can print as many pages as you need to for the other work. The 7 areas of self. The third column focuses on the 7 areas of self. These are found on page 64 through 65 in the big book. Our focus will be on self-esteem, pride, ambition, security, personal relations, sex relations, and pocketbook. I ask myself, how do my resentments affect me in these areas of my life? Keep in mind that sex relations has nothing to do with the act of sex here. Rather, focus on male, female, same-sex, whatever world you happen to live in, type of relationship with the partner of your choice. While pride is not listed on these pages, it is included in the 7 deadly sins, which is discussed in the 12 and 12 in step 4, page 48. It also ties very closely with self-esteem and gives me a different perspective on looking at myself. The 7 deadly sins are pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. And in the 7 areas of self here, we just added pride in because it's so closely related to everything that goes on with our self-esteem.
So, in looking at that 4th column, I've got at the top of the page, God, please let me see the truth. And this is where I start looking at these 7 areas of self, and they're up in the left-hand corner in the blue. The self-esteem, the pride, ambition, security, personal relations, sex relations, and pocketbook. I'm going to use 1 page for each resentment, not 1 page per person. So like I said on the slide earlier, there were 4 people on that list of resentments. There were 11 individual resentments. So by the time I'm done with this, I'm going to have filled this page out 11 different times, 1 for each resentment. Because we find that it's much easier to look at each individual resentment rather than bunching them all together. And maybe the little one I might be able to work through and forgive and move on, and then that pile is going to be a little bit smaller. And it also helps me see what it is I'm looking at. How does each individual resentment affect me? Not rather than trying to bunch it all together. It's like, well, sometimes I feel like this and sometimes I feel like that. It's looking at one resentment, working through all the 7 areas of self, and then moving on to the second resentment and going through all of the 7 areas of self. So for this example, we're looking at, in the upper right-hand corner, there'll be a spot. First name, Mr. Brown. First resentment, his attention to my wife. We're only going to follow this 1 resentment all the way through. We're not going to go through all 11 of them, but just to give you an idea of what these sheets are going to look like when you're done. So it says, affects mine. Keep columns 1 and 2 in mind while writing the 3rd column. Reference page 65, paragraph 3, where it says, we considered it carefully. I want to look at the 3rd column and consider the opposite of each sentence that I write, and as well as what I did write, and see what fears are being revealed behind each one of the 7 areas of self. And that'll make a little bit more sense as we go on. So the first thing I'm looking at is the self-esteem. And we define that by how do I see or feel about myself? What role have I assigned to myself in this relationship within this resentment? And sentences are usually going to start with I am. So if I'm looking at the resentment of his attention to my wife, the self-esteem may be I'm the best husband she could have. Or the opposite of that, I'm the worst breadwinner there is. And what fears could be related with that? The fear that I'm not good enough. I may be doing the best I can, but I'm just not good enough for her. What's another fear? The fear that somebody's going to steal my wife or my spouse. Then moving on to pride. How I think others see or feel about me. What's the role I have assigned myself in the others' lives? Sentences will start with others should or others should not. For example, others should not pay so much attention to my wife. And what's the fears there? The fear of being alone. Possibly the fear of being abandoned if she decides to run off with him.
And still in the 7 areas of self and moving into ambition. What do I want to happen here? Sentences start with, for example, I want a healthy, happy relationship. Or maybe I want to be left alone, damn it. And what are the fears associated with that? Being alone, maybe losing everything that I have. Security. What do I need to be okay here? Sentences start with, I need my wife to love and respect me. I need Brown to respect my marriage. Fears associated with that. Being disrespected, maybe being unlovable. We've all had those fears. Personal relationships, my deep-seated beliefs of how this relationship is supposed to look like. Wives trust their husbands. Friends should respect me, my marriage, my family. Identify the fear, not being accepted and not being respected. Sex relationships, my deep-seated beliefs of how real men and or real women are supposed to be. Sentences start with a real man or real woman should be. Real men don't pursue other men's wives. Identify the fear, abandonment. Pocketbook affects my finances. Sentences start with no one should or shouldn't. Examples, others should not go into my wallet without my permission. No one should go into my phone without my permission. Brown should not ask my wife for dinner and then ask her to pay for it. And identifying the fear there is financial insecurity. I want to touch on 2 things here. One, a lot of our personal relationship ideas we got from mom and dad and grandma and grandpa when we were growing up. And you know, we saw the way they interacted in the house and in the kitchen and around the dinner table and all. Sometimes we've had some real poor role models in our life. Others of us have had great role models. So we drag that into our lives. On the pocketbook, the reason that we put go into my wallet without my permission, my wife used to tell me to get stuff out of her purse all the time and bring it to her. I would go get her purse and take it to her. What's going on inside of her pocketbook is none of my business. And, you know, if I see something that I don't like, then all of a sudden I'm going to start being nosy about it. And I don't want to be that guy. There's another reason that we brought the phone into this. How many of us do business and banking business on our phones today? You know, many of us contribute to we do online banking. We contribute to our 7th tradition with Venmo and PayPal. We generally do that through our phones and stuff. So if somebody goes into my phone without my permission, they could easily go to my Venmo account and Venmo themselves $500. And I don't want that either. So it is a financial security issue.
And again, just a copy of the worksheets that we would have available for you. The yellow is what we've just went over. It'll be printed, it'll have the examples of what we had. And it'll print out in white if you print them off. On the white side, it's blank because you've got to fill it out yourself. I'm resentful at who, and I'm resentful at them why. And then filling in the self-esteem, the pride, the ambition, and all of the all of the 7 areas of self in that column on the right-hand side there to add your fears in. And we're going to look at the fears a couple of slides later when we get to that fear inventory.
Haha, my favorite 4th column worksheet. This is where I discover my defects of character and shortcomings. The directions are found on page 67, paragraph 2 in the big book. Use 1 page per individual. Resolutely look for the harms that I have done to others. List where I am to blame. This will be the foundation of my 8-step list. This form may need to be modified for institutions. I continue to recognize my own fears. The directions for our fear inventory is found on page 68. Hang on before you move on, Trish. I like where it says here, this will be the foundation for my 8-step list. If anybody's ever been through treatment and you did a 4th step with a counselor there, they probably had you burn the 4th step or dispose of it. Many sponsors will tell their sponsees to go burn their 4th step when it's done. But this is where I get my 8th step and develop it from there. Also, when I go into my 8th and 9th step work and making my amends, I have my 4th step to refresh my memory of exactly what my role in things was. Okay, Trish.
So, our 4th column worksheet. And again, at the top of every page it says, God, please let me see the truth. You can pause and pray, meditate over it, write over it, just a reminder to invite God into the process. And this page is an example of what the 4th column page, we're giving you a whole page rather than a column. Because I know for me, if I'm trying to squeeze all these columns onto one piece of paper, when I run out of room, I'm just going to say, I'm done, and put it away. But if I have a separate piece of paper for each column, I'm not going to run out of room. And that way I know I'm going to be thorough and I know I'm going to get everything out that I need to get out. But this is what the page should look like. And it can be done in phrases, not in full sentences. You don't need to write your life story, just enough information so when you are taking it to someone with your 5th step, there's enough there so that you remember what it is you're talking about. And then you can go into more detail during your conversation. So the realization that I have done the things I've presented in column 2 to the person I've listed in column 1 or to others. Or when did I retaliate and get back at you just because you did something that pissed me off? So first I'm going to look at where had I been self-seeking. And I want to look around the entire relation, the entire resentment. What did I do? Where was I to blame? Because this is where I'm starting to look at me. I'm not looking at them anymore. What were my selfish actions and my selfish activities? Who did I affect and who else did I pull into the drama? I placed blame. I acted out. Maybe I called your boss to tattle. I said I was going out with my friends, but I was really going somewhere to get laid. Where had I been selfish? What was my selfish thinking while I was doing those above self-seeking actions? My selfish attitudes were what? I demanded to get my own way. I was filing divorce papers in my mind while we were in bed. I had it all planned out. You were going to pay and I was going to cut you off.
And continuing, where had I been dishonest? What were the lies I was telling myself that resulted in my selfish thinking above? Where was I in delusion? I could find someone better. You would never be good enough. You didn't care about me and our family. Where had I been afraid? What are the fears that drive the delusions above? I was afraid I'd be alone, even though I didn't want you. The children wouldn't have their other parent. I wouldn't be able to pay the bills, and we would be homeless. I feared for my own safety or retaliation, as the case may be. The above fears drive the dishonesty that result in the selfish attitude behind the self-seeking actions.
Consider if there are any other fears that need to be added to the fear list. Consider the opposite of each fear. We've already got this nice long list of fears now, the paragraph above and off of the column 1 and column 2 page. So look at each fear and look at what the opposite is. And if it applies, add it onto the list. Don't just look for negative, look for positives as well. I fear being alone. Or not necessarily an opposite, or not necessarily an either or, but another perspective. I fear meeting another abusive partner. I fear being homeless, but I also fear having to move back in to live with my parents. I fear losing my job for the lies that I told while I was out. I fear my truth. I fear being successful. I fear having too many friends. And then I start looking at the harm. Do I see the harm that I caused other people? Look around the resentment, parents, friends, employers, innocent bystanders. And these innocent bystanders are the friends who I complained to who had nothing to do with the situation, but I know that they're going to pat me on the back and say, oh, you poor dear. And then they're going to take my side. And that's just going to help fuel my resentment and make it bigger rather than trying to do this work and making that resentment go away. So I've harmed my spouse and my children with my lies. I've harmed my boss by not showing up for work. I've harmed my relationship with other family members. I've harmed my credit and financial status due to my selfish actions. And I've harmed friendships by complaining about my spouse to them.
Trish, spotlight me again for a second before we move into this. This just seems like the right time. So we've talked a lot about fear, and we're going to talk a little more about fear, but here's what happens with fear, folks. We throw it out like a blanket of fog over everything. Anybody ever drive in that blinding fog where you can't see 10 feet in front of you? And what do? We put the death grip on the steering wheel and we keep praying to get through it, and eventually that fog lifts. But we just use the word fear without defining what those fears are, and we throw it over this and we throw it over this, and we become absolutely paralyzed by those fears. Fear is something that is also God-given. If we're out on a hiking trail and we see a snake or a bear, that's a natural fear that God's given us for a protective instinct. But so often we can become paralyzed with them. And if I'm not careful, what'll happen is one more time I will wrap myself up in a blanket of fear, and I will hide under the covers, and I will not deal with them. I will not deal with life, and I'll go into that deep depression and self-pity. And then I won't know how to get out of it, so I'll get extreme anxiety trying to work my way out of it, and I just become paralyzed. So while we mention a lot about the fears here, defining them is vitally, vitally important to understanding what they are. Okay, Trish. Oh, and it's my slide. It's my slide. Yay! I love this slide. Our fear inventory. Read the big book from page 67, third paragraph. Notice the word fear. 2, page 68, third paragraph, to outgrow fear. List all the fears. Make a graph of columns or use the fear inventory template. We will focus on the first column, and then we will look at each row individually. Take all your fears that you wrote in your inventory, that would be back in the third column, and make one single list, first column. List each different fear only once in the first column. Why do I have this fear? Look around each fear. The next slide will show you how to follow the trail of fears by looking at the fears hidden behind each fear. Reference page 68. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We ask ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance had failed us?
And I'm going to take the next 2 pages.
Yes, you are.
And I'm actually going to skip over this one because it's repeated on the next page.
Okay.
Because I'm just making that call tonight. So this is our fear template. And right now, just for the example, we're just going to follow the one fear of not being good enough. But when you're actually doing this, and we have a real life version that we'll be showing you in a little bit later, you'll have all your fears listed in that first column, top to bottom, just like we did in column 1 and column 2 as we were starting out the 4th step with the names and the resentments. We'll work top to bottom, then we go across the side. So I fear not being good enough. Why am I afraid of not being good enough? What's the fear that's hiding underneath that? And the fear that's hiding underneath that is the fear that I'm going to be unwanted. You don't want me. I'm not good enough. You don't want me anymore. What's the fear of me being unwanted? It's the fear that I'm going to be alone. And I don't want to be alone. It's really uncomfortable. The fear behind being alone is the fear of that emotional pain. And I know me. I'll get in that emotional pain. I'll sit in that emotional pain. I will grow roots and I will never come out. I'm just going to spend the rest of my life in that emotional pain. What's the fear of being in that emotional pain? It's the fear that I'm going to drink again. Because if I'm sitting there paralyzed, I don't see any other option but. What's the fear behind drinking again? The fear that I'm going to die. And what's the fear behind dying? Is the fear of the unknown, and behind that, the fear that there is no God. Then I'm going to go back this 1 page, but wasn't I trying to kill myself anyway? And is this the alcoholic insanity? Is this how I should think the drink through and see what all those fears are that's causing me to feel and act that way? And am I setting myself up for a drink when I'm sitting there drowning in my fears? Each of us will need to follow the trail to identify our own fears and each subsequent fear that's underneath. And then in our example on on slide 53, we're going to look at some repeated fears and then how we can use those patterns in our inventory. Now it's your favorite page.
Yes, yes it is. Let's talk about sex. Our sex inventory and sex ideal from pages 68 through 69. Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It is easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes. Absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cried that sex is a lust of our lower nature and a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think that we do not have enough of it or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not wish to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? We reviewed our own conduct over the past years. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should have we done instead? We got all this down on paper and looked at it, and those are some very specific questions that we're supposed to ask ourselves.
So the sex inventory and sex ideal instructions continuing. The following are the directions for the sex inventory in question form, taken right out of the book. And like with all the other pages and parts to this inventory, we always ask God to show us what we need to see before we get started. So first we're going to read the big book from page 68, the 4th paragraph where it says now about sex. And read that all the way to page 70, the 2nd paragraph where it ends up with would bring heartache. And then I'm going to pray. I'm going to ask God to show me. And then I'll make a list of all the relationships in my life. And then number 3, I determine what can be done. I'll write a brief history of each relationship, including motives for getting involved, specific sex conduct, major points in the relationship, and how the relationship ended or how it is now.
I review my conduct and look at each relationship, answering the following questions, and there's 9 of them here. Where had I been selfish? Where had I been dishonest? Where had I been inconsiderate? Whom did I hurt, including those we brought into our drama, including innocent bystanders? Did I arouse jealousy? Did I arouse suspicion? Did I arouse bitterness? Where was I at fault? What should I have done instead? The answer to the last question is never I shouldn't have gotten involved, because I can't change the past. I did get involved, and now it has become an experience in my life. Refer instead, what should I have done, or how should I have behaved in the relationship? Make sure you are especially complete with this answer. It will be used later in the sex ideal.
And then writing my sex ideal, and this comes directly out of our book, pages 69 and 70. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and to help us live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose, and we avoid hysterical thinking or advice.
Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does that mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but that's only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are the facts of our experience. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge to yield, when to yield would mean heartbreak. The reading continues through the end of the chapter on page 71, encouraging us to review our work and move forward towards amends. This also encourages us to continue to align ourselves with God so that He can remove whatever self-will has blocked us from Him.
Now, the following slides are a real working example of a 4th step inventory. It follows the first person in column 1 all the way from the first resentment through all 4 columns, discovery along the trail of fears, and ending with the sex inventory and sex ideal. It takes us through the entire inventory process, starting on page 65 to the end of page 71, and completes step 4 on this one resentment. And the reason we do this is because, Mr. Jones is a fictitious person. May have been somebody that Bill knew, but by doing this, this is a resentment that perhaps many of us hold, or similar to one that many of us hold. So it may give us an idea and make it a little bit more personal as we go through the process.
Boy, howdy. It's real, all right. This is a working example of an actual resentment, starting with the first name and the first resentment. This will be column 1 and 2 from the big book. Make a list of the people that we have a resentment against. List each resentment with the person. In this case, it's Dad. The cause: he abandoned our family and left us with nothing and nowhere to go. Use the following page to continue with 1 page per resentment. Multiple resentments would mean multiple pages. So if you have 5 resentments against Dad, it would be broken up into 5 pages to break that pile of spaghetti apart one noodle at a time.
So, the resentment inventory, and at the top of the page is our prayer: God, please let me see the truth. And our 7 areas of self are written in the upper left-hand corner: self-esteem, pride, ambition, security, personal relations, sex relations, pocketbook, and they all come from page 64. So I'm resentful at my father. I'm resentful at him because he abandoned our family and left us with nothing and nowhere to go. This affects my self-esteem. I am not good enough for him to stick around. He loved my brother more. And the fears behind that: the fear of not being good enough, the fear of being alone, and the fear of abandonment. This affects my pride. No father should be angry or violent to a 3-year-old. Fathers shouldn't leave their sons. And the fears behind that: anger, the fear of violence, the fear of being unlovable, and again, the fear of abandonment.
And again, some of this is difficult, folks, but these are real things that happen in our alcoholic lives. Sometimes from the time that we're children. And that's why we felt it was important to show what a real live working resentment looks like coming through. Still in the 7 areas of self, this affects my ambition. I want my dad back. I want to be loved by my dad. I want my dad to be a role model. The fear associated with that is abandonment and not having a role model, not having a strong father presence in my life. This affects my security. I need to feel safe to be okay. I need to feel loved to be okay. I need to have shelter and food to be okay. The fears associated with that are homelessness, hungry, being hurt, alone, emotional pain, and being unlovable. This affects my personal relationships. Real men don't leave their families. Real men support their families. The fear associated with that is being alone, not knowing how to treat others. This affects my sex relationships. Real men don't bring strange people into their homes to have sex with their families and then leave to have sex somewhere else. The fears associated with that are abandonment, sexual abuse, molestation, not being safe, fear of not knowing what a healthy relationship is or looks like. This affects my pocketbook. Others should not threaten my home and food, utilities, finances, etc. The fears associated with that are possibly being homeless, abandonment, going hungry, not being able to pay my bills.
And now we're moving into the 4th column, and again at the top of the page: God, please let me see the truth. And now I'm looking at me. I'm looking at finding my patterns, my defects of character, my shortcomings. And the realization: did I repeat or develop the same behavior that I resented in column 2 to the person that I've listed in column 1 or others? If my resentment is Dad left the family, have I abandoned other people? Have I left my family? Have I left friends? When have I done the same thing to either Dad, the person in column 1, or to other people? Where had I been self-seeking? And these are the actions. I acted out to get my own way. I put unreasonable demands on my father, mother, and other family members. I knew emotional drama would always get me attention. I blamed you for my problems. Where had I been selfish? And this is my selfish thinking that leads to the self-seeking behaviors. I didn't care what others had to sacrifice to please me. I constantly demanded attention. When I didn't get the attention, I accused others of not loving me. Where had I been dishonest? I would always tell lies. I would steal things. If I got in trouble, I would blame others. I had been so dishonest for so long, I couldn't even see what the real truth was. And the biggest tragedy I know now is I was lying to me.
And the fourth column worksheet continued. Where had I been afraid? I was afraid of being caught in my lies. I was afraid that I wouldn't be loved because of my lies. I was afraid I would always be alone and not wanted by anyone. The above fears drive the delusions that result in the attitudes behind the actions. Consider if there's any other fears that should be on the fear list. Consider the opposite of each fear if it applies and add it to the list. I had a fear of abandonment or of staying in an unhealthy, toxic relationship. Fear of being alone or filling my life with the wrong people. Fear of too many people in my life or fear of being invisible to others. Fear of staying in a bad relationship or not by being financially stable enough to be on my own.
And like I said earlier, even though the word or is in there, the or is just a different perspective of that same fear. When I'm listing my fears, I don't have to pick one or the other. Both of them may apply. And if both apply, write them both down.
Before you move on that slide, Trish, I want to point out at the very top margin of that page, you can see where somebody started writing and ripped pages out. How appropriate! Because so oftentimes we start doing an immoral inventory of ourselves rather than a searching and fearless moral inventory, and we generally end up starting a new page. Okay.
And now we're moving back into that trail of fears. So I'm going to look at all the fears that I found when I was doing columns 1, 2, and 3, and the fears that I did as I worked on column 4, and write them up and down in the first column in this template. And working top to bottom, I fear not being good enough, being alone, abandonment, anger, violence towards me, going hungry, being unlovable, not having a role model, being homeless. And we got a whole another page of those, but I'm not going to read through all of them. It'll extend this workshop by another half an hour or so. Once I have them all written top to bottom, and even though they may have shown up in the inventory multiple times, I'm only going to write them once. So I'm going to go back to that top column. I fear not being good enough. And why do I fear not being good enough? What's the fear that's underneath that? The fear underneath that is because I'm afraid I'm going to be unwanted. You're not going to want me if I'm not good enough for you, if I don't live up to your standards. Why do I have the fear of being unwanted? Because I'm afraid of being alone. Why am I afraid of being alone? Because I'm afraid of the emotional pain. If I'm alone, I'm sitting in my head. And if I'm sitting in my head and that emotional pain starts, who knows where I'm going to end up? And what's the fear of being and then sitting in that emotional pain? The fear of drinking again. And what's the fear of drinking again? The fear of death or insanity. And why do I fear death or insanity? Because I fear the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen. And I fear the unknown because I'm afraid there is no God, because at this point I'm living in self-reliance, not God-reliance. And I've taken that fear about as far as I can go. The fact that I'm afraid there is no God, there really isn't anywhere else I can go. So I'm going to come down to the next row. The fear of being alone. But the fear of being alone is already in that top row, in the third column. So I'm going to put those X's there. And the red just means stop. I've done this one already. There's no need for me to redo it again. But I want to remember that, the fear of being alone has already come up twice. So it's just something to keep in the back of my head. Moving down one more row, the fear of abandonment. Why do I have this fear of abandonment? Because I have a fear of being alone, and there it is again, 3 times. Now, if I have a fear that's coming up this many times in my life, when I take this to my sponsor in my 5th step, it's probably something I want to talk about. Because obviously, even though, like Jamie said, we throw the word fear all over the place like it's a blanket. I fear of this, I fear of that, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that. But when I did this and I looked at all my fears in this manner, I really only had 4 or 5 main fears that everything else just grew out of. And if the point of doing our steps and our 4th and 5th step is to look for patterns, here's a pattern right here. Moving down one more row, the fear of anger. Why do I fear anger? Because it's an unpredictable emotion. And what's the fear about that being about that unpredictable emotion is because I don't know what I'm capable of when I'm angry. I've seen what I do when I'm angry, and it's not pretty. Why am I afraid of not knowing what I'm capable of? Because that puts me right back in the emotional pain. So now I'm on the 4th row, and I've already got 2 different fears that are repeated. And then I'm going to drop down. Violence towards me is going to end up in emotional pain. I'm going to go back down to being hungry. Being hungry, why do I fear that? Because I don't feel well when I'm not hungry. Because I don't eat, I'm hungry. It's the financial insecurity. What's the fear of not feeling well because I haven't eaten? Because I'm going to overreact to things at work. If I don't feel well, that's the first, I'm always going to overreact to whatever's happening. Why do I have the fear of overreacting to something at work? Because I'm going to get pulled into the boss's office. Even as an adult, I don't like getting called into the principal's office, I'll tell you that. Why do I have the fear of being called into the boss's office? Because my brain is automatically going to take me to, I'm getting fired. Why am I afraid of getting fired? Because I won't be able to pay my bills. I'm going to lose my home. I'm going to be homeless. And then here comes that emotional pain again. I'm living smack dab in that emotional pain. So now we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different fears that I found in my inventory. But behind each one is the big fear is on the fear of being alone and the fear of that emotional pain. So I can say I'm not afraid of the abandonment, I'm afraid of being alone. And I know that because I've done the inventory and I know what my 5 big fears are. It takes a little bit of work, it can be a little bit fearful to do it, but again, working with a sponsor to help you work through what the fears are, where they come up, and how to deal with them. That's what the sponsor's for. Next.
Okay, this is a real working example of a sex inventory from an actual real resentment. This inventory is based on a list made from a history of relationships from page 69. It's not a continuing work of column 1. This is an inventory on our own conduct in relationships, not based in resentment. So we have the name of the person. We write a brief history of the relationship. What were my motives for getting involved? He or she sure was cute. He or she sure was so friendly. Their smile sucked me in and made me melt. My specific conduct in the relationship has been. My specific conduct was totally self-seeking, so I could feel better about myself. Others commented on how cute my boyfriend or girlfriend was. Ooh, there's some pride and ego.
The major points that came up in this relationship are, I don't play well with others. I always want my own way, especially if it's sexually motivated. I want control in every situation, whether it's sexual or not. And I would do whatever it took to keep you from leaving me. Would fight over spending time with my family at holidays. Religion and politics always lead to more fighting, sometimes to more beatings. How did it end? Or how is it now? I walked away in anger because because you didn't do what I wanted. Or I acted out in a way so you would leave. That way I wasn't the bad one for leaving. But regardless of how it ended, the relationship on both of our parts was so sick and toxic that leaving was a means of survival. And just a footnote after this, After the process of taking these steps and making amends, some of these relationships do heal and become healthy friendships. But even if they don't, the important part is that we take a look we take a look at ourselves and take responsibility for our own actions.
Did you flip the slide? I'm sorry, I missed it.
I did.
Okay. So, again, continued real-life working resentment. Look at each relationship and answer the 9 questions. Reference page 69 in our big book. Where had I been selfish, concerned only with myself? I wanted sex all the time, or I never wanted sex. I was demanding. When I didn't want sex, I pushed you away or rejected you. I demanded unhealthy or unreasonable sex. Where had I been dishonest, deceptive, or fraudulent? I said you were the only one, but you weren't. I said I was going to work early, but I stopped by to see my girlfriend first. Where had I been inconsiderate, disregard for others? I did not consider your feelings. I did not consider your plans when I decided to stay at work late and went to see my girlfriend.
Who did I hurt? And I want to look around the whole relationship. I hurt my spouse. I hurt our children. I hurt my boyfriend's children. I hurt extended family members. And I hurt relationships at work when they caught me in my lies. How did I arouse jealousy? I would constantly openly flirt with others in front of my husband. I'd flirt with my friends' husbands in front of them. How did I arouse suspicions? How did I make you doubt my honesty? I lied about where I was going to be and when I was going to be home. I would constantly take phone calls and texts when I was home, but I wouldn't let you see who they were from. I'd leave the room and I'd hide my phone so you couldn't see anything about it. I'd call you from his house, but his parrot was squawking in the background and I couldn't figure out how you knew I was there. How did I arouse bitterness or deep resentment? I left our family gatherings to see his family instead. I paid his rent and neglected our family. I lashed out in anger, always defensive. They need me! And where was I at fault? I put our family second to their family and their needs.
And question 9. What should I have done instead? Don't write, not gotten involved in the first place. Because I did, and it's part of my experience now. What should my behavior in the relationship have been? Make sure you're especially explicit about number 9. You will refer back to this list when writing your sex ideal. I should have put my family first, been honorable and faithful, financially and emotionally supportive to my family. I should have been kind, loving, and tolerant. I should have taken care of others' needs before mine. I should have prayed and asked God for help. Harms, write any specific harm that comes to you while writing. The realization that I caused deep emotional wounds in my family that may never be repaired. Many of the things I did would be considered abusive or narcissistic. In my experience, I have caused unknown and sometimes irreversible damage to others' lives. And I can tell you that's a fact for me. And a prayer. God, I ask you to help me mold the ideal relationship, what the ideal relationship should be in my life, that I may be able to live by that ideal and to live in a healthy relationship with others. Amen.
Now that we have followed the instructions and taken a look at ourselves and our conduct, let's now turn to page 69, paragraphs 3 and 4, and refer to the instructions in writing our sexual ideal. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and to help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it.
There are 12 steps and 12 traditions for recovery. There are 11 chapters in our book. Is it possible that the 12th chapter in your big book will be your story? So how will it read? Finding yourself through this inventory could be the beginning of your 12th, chapter 12. It is now up to you to write your chapter 12.
And a quick 5th step note. The bottom of page 74 to the top of page 75 gives us directions of how to choose who is to hear our 5th step. Its suggestion is that we choose someone who will keep our confidentiality. This could be a priest, minister, rabbi, counselor, people who are bound by confidentiality by law. However, experience has taught us the value of taking this step with another alcoholic, or sponsorship. We believe that the advantage to this is that the experience of another alcoholic knows where to direct us next through the process of recovery. We recommend that you prayerfully ask God to bring the right person into your life to help through this process.
We hope that you will continue to join us for our bi-monthly workshop, as this work is only a beginning into the truth about ourselves. It is our experience that when people return month after month with new questions, we all grow in effectiveness and understanding. We continue to ask God to mold us into the people He would have us be, so that we can help others to find their truth. Yours in service with love, Lppbbsg. Thank you, folks. And now we are open for questions, comments, observations. Oh, good. We can all pack up and go home now. Oh, I am home.
Donald's not home, he's at the beach.
What's that?
If you're not home, you're at the beach.
He's being a happy Jack.
Well, I guess I could go home real quick. Oh, jeez.
Here comes the Hobbit house.
Nope. Okay, there's the Hobbit house. I'm ready for...
You and me both.
The only thing is I got a commitment at 10 o'clock tonight.
So take a nap and set a very, very loud alarm.